Heyo everybody, Haku here with a discussion video on One Piece where I'm just gonna double down on my Straw Hat predictions from a year or two ago. Now it's been a good over a year, maybe around 2 years, since I did the last video I did trying to predict the remaining Straw Hats, and I actually think that even if my end results end up being incorrect, like the characters that I was like, I think that, like, the characters that I think, okay, yeah, they fit the role, they'll be the next Straw Hat or whatever. Um, I do feel like even if my sort of end game conclusions are incorrect, I feel like my logic is sound, even more so now. So again, back then, a lot of these characters, we knew a lot less about them. This was like pre the end game of Onigashima and everything. So right now, what I'm feeling like is there's four basic options. Option one, Jinbei meme, crew's full, nobody else. I think that's somewhat likely, but not really. The second option is there's going to be 10 Straw Hats in the end game to match what Luffy said, 10 other than Luffy, to match what Luffy said at the start of the series. I've always considered that to be kind of loose. I don't think it means there's literally going to be 10. But maybe, like the official One Piece something or another said recently that Luffy doesn't count himself among the 10, and everybody's been jumping on that to be like, oh, so there is going to be one more. He did specifically say 10, and also it might be what Oda was planning at the beginning, because we know a lot of things have changed over the course of writing One Piece into what it is. Vivi wasn't planned at first. Vivi just sort of naturally happened. Law wasn't planned to be as important as he was. He was kind of just originally going to be a Sabaody character, but then he ended up changing into a much more important character. So there are things that weren't planned from the beginning, but from the beginning, we've seen these preliminary sketches of what the Straw Hat crew was going to look like. And like Nami, Sanji, Luffy, and Zoro look fairly similar. There are some differences, but they look about the same. And this is just from the beginning. We have Usopp, but a lot has changed about him. The general idea of Chopper and Brook, but a bit have changed. Frankie and Robin were like really, really, really changed. And then we saw this at first. And it's like this was the original sketch for what the crew was supposed to be. Then we find out a little bit later on, we didn't see the full sketch. To avoid spoilers, there was a bit left out, and we see that a Fishman helmsman was also there. We also know that originally that Fishman helmsman was going to be somebody different. It wasn't going to be Jinbei. Jinbei was originally sort of an antagonist kind of figure, but somewhere along the way, again, Oda changed his mind, wrote things differently, and that Fishman helmsman ended up being Jinbei. But the thing is, all their roles were basically the same as they are now, except Usopp, rather than being sniper, which is pretty nebulous, I'm pretty certain was vice captain, which is a more piratey role. And there's also the fact that the Robin character was originally supposed to be like, what is it? Like a, oh my god, I lost, and wow, I am just blanking out. An herbologist? An arbologist? I don't know. Somebody who studies plants. Why am I blanking out on the word? That happens sometimes when recording. Whatever. But originally wasn't supposed to be like, wow, why am I not thinking of this? I'm so embarrassed. But yeah, eventually that changed into being an archaeologist. It was originally meant to be a man, but then it eventually just became Robin instead. So there were some things that changed, and there is still kind of a blank space going on in like the upper right corner. So there could be a 10th one that, again, to avoid spoilers, has just been erased. If there is a 10th, then I think Carrot right now makes the most logical sense for that. Carrot just has done so many things that fit so perfectly into the lookout role. There's already the inherited will stuff. There's already a character arc going on there. So it just makes the most sense. It could be Smoker instead, though. I never knew that people thought Smoker for Straw Hat was even a thing until like a couple years ago when I saw that Morge video, and I was like, people think Smoker is going to be a Straw Hat? But then, thinking about it, Smoker and Kobe kind of overlap a bit. Like if Kobe's big thing is becoming an admiral in the end, then it's like, what's Smoker's end goal? Like, that kind of overlaps a little. We don't know what his actual dream is. We don't know what his backstory is, but we know he has the connection to Roger, like watching his execution and everything. And we know that he's getting more and more sick of the world government's shit. So again, it could be Smoker, actually. And it would make sense too, because Smoker was introduced before the Straw Hats even got to the Grand Line. And the same goes here with Jimbei. Jimbei, the idea of him was brought up even like before Arlong Park or whatever. So again, it could be one of those things where it could be Smoker. I think Carrot makes the most logical sense. I think there's a chance, though, that, again, first option, crew's full. Second option, we get 10. Third option, we get 12. Now, there's a lot of evidence for this, just because it matches, like, the Titans of mythology, the, like, Olympic gods or whatever, the 12 disciples of Jesus, the 12 signs of the Zodiac, plus the 13th is the cat, so Nami's in there. And there's a lot of just symbolism to justify that connection to religious stuff. We have like the Titanic captains of Blackbeard, and we don't know if he's going to get more because we got the Moria stuff going on there. So we don't know what's going on with that. Also, I hate theories that are like, well, this chapter must be about this because we use the Goro Awase or whatever. And it's like, there's so much that doesn't mean anything. And it's like these theories are always wrong. They're always wrong about what's happening in this chapter, but then they make another one for the next chapter. But you can't blame them for trying to look at numbers in certain aspects, because there are ones that are just straight up important, straight up used a lot. Sanji always has a bunch of 3s and a bunch of 4ths used for him, because he's Sanji 3. He's the third son of the Vinsmokes. He's the third in joining order if you're not counting Nami until after Arlong Park. Technically, when Oda lists it out, he's listed after Nami, so he's 4th. He's part of a group of quadruplets. If you count Reiju as his older sister, he's the 4th child. And there's just a bunch of like cover pages and drawings and stuff of Sanji with 3s and 4s. Zoro is often associated a lot with 1s. He's the first person to join Luffy. His bounty right now is 1111 and a bunch of 0s. Luffy always has 5s and 6s because of Gomu Gomu. It's just one of those things that you can't blame people for looking at stuff like that when some of that stuff is actually important. Some of that stuff does actually just come into play. And that's why I wanted to bring up that every other pirate crew was always called Kaizokudan, like the Whitebeard Kaizokudan, Blackbeard, etc., etc. But the Straw Hats have always been called Mugiwara no Ichimi. And of course, Ichi, me, 1, 3, 13. Does that mean, and there's a big 1 and 3 on the sides of the Sunny. Does that mean the Sunny is the 13th technically? Does that mean we're having 13 including Luffy at the end? Again, it's one of those things where I hate looking into Goro Awase that much, but it's hard to refute it when literally every single other group of pirates is called one thing and the Straw Hats are called something else. Also, again, just this religious symbolism. We have a bunch of like the weapon names: Pluton, Uranus, Neptune, named after old Greek gods or whatever. The devil fruits are devil fruits. There's God Valley, and the celestial dragons call themselves gods. There's the seraphim or angels. There's the Adam and Eve trees. So again, there's a lot of religious symbolism that goes on in One Piece. So again, having 12 crewmates with Luffy at the end does make sense. And if so, if it's 3, I already talked about Carrot and Smoker making sense. I think Carrot, Bellamy, and Smoker make the most sense as the last 3. I think they match the sort of zodiac animals. The 3 that we were missing were sort of traditionally, people guess, the dog, the rabbit, and the snake, or no, the dragon. See, Smoker could be the dragon, or we could consider God Usopp the dragon and Smoker as the snake. Bellamy the hyena kind of fits the dog. If we're still going with this, Carrot fits the rabbit, obviously. Or if you're looking at it a different way, people who say that those are the 3 we're missing often say that Chopper is the rat, but there could just be the chance that Chopper is the rabbit because, again, in the sort of zodiac story and way of telling time, the rabbit sort of grinds medicine, and so Chopper does that, but the rat is a stowaway, so Carrot does that. So there could be a chance that Carrot is the rat and Chopper is the rabbit in the whole sort of Zodiac connection with the Straw Hats. So there is that. There's that possibility too. I think those three fit the most perfectly. Again, Carrot and Bellamy are the only characters other than like Straw Hats and arc villains, princess characters and stuff. They're the only ones that don't fit into a certain group. They're the only exceptions that Luffy calls by name. He just calls Bellamy and Carrot, Bellamy and Carrot. So there's just so much different about them from the others. And again, I'm not going to go super deep into like theory crafting for everyone. But again, Bellamy's whole thing was that he didn't have any dream, and that's why he wanted to follow after Doflamingo, but now he has a new man that he wants to follow after. He says that for Luffy. He goes out, he learns a skill being a sail and flag maker that would be helpful on the ship now, being a sail and flag maker. So again, I feel like Bellamy returning eventually makes sense. He was given a piece of Luffy's Viver card. So yeah, if there's three more, that's my guess for those three more. But my theory that I made last time, we're finally over 10 minutes into the video getting into it. The theory that I made last time that I'm going to double down on is that there are going to be 5,656 Straw Hats. 5656, Gomu Gomu. And the reason I thought of this theory to begin with when I made it way back then was because I was just looking at the Grand Fleet and we're given a specific number for them. 5640. Why? Why 5640? Why on earth would... Like, if it's supposed to be a Gomu reference, 5600, what's with the extra 40? But if you take 5640, add 12 official Straw Hats, add 4 honorary Straw Hats, you've got 5656. Luffy's friends are his Gomu Gomu. And it's a big Gomu Gomu reference. I think we got 5640 because there's going to be 12 Straw Hats and there's going to be 4 honorary Straw Hats. That is the guess I made back then. And the justification that I used to make that, and that I used to try to guess who would fill these roles before I tell you who I thought then and who I think now, which hasn't really changed much of any. I thought the first 4 people to join the Straw Hats, the ones that join, well, okay, the first 4 joined in the East Blue. Next 4 joined in Paradise, then 4 in New World, and 4 would return at the end to be honorary Straw Hats. They don't necessarily need to go to Laugh Tale, but that's a part of what I was saying. So yeah, the first 4, the 4 that joined in East Blue, those 4 were just pretty much obvious. Like, we weren't going to leave Arlong Park with Gensan, we're leaving with Nami. We weren't going to leave Baratier with Patty, we're leaving with Sanji. We aren't going to take the 3 kids with us. We're taking Usopp. So they were kind of just obvious people who joined quickly in order to fill out the main cast before we get into the real story in the Grand Line. So then we get to the Grand Line. We get to Paradise. And the 4 that joined in Paradise weren't obvious. They weren't the first person for that position that we met. When Nami needs a doctor, we go and we learn that the only doctor is Kureha. She's the only one there. We don't know that Chopper can talk at first for a while, let alone that he's a doctor, that he has medical knowledge. So we don't even know he's a doctor or anything like that at first. So again, Chopper wasn't the first doctor we met. He wasn't some obvious choice until he was. Even at the end, he was still denying going with them until Luffy's like, shut up, come with us. The next, we're so like convinced, we're like, is Vivi joining? Is Vivi not joining? Robin joins out of nowhere. Robin wasn't an obvious choice to join whatsoever. Next, we get into the Frankie situation where, again, we didn't know at first that Frankie was a shipwright or knew anything about being a shipwright at all, and we were introduced to a bunch of other characters who were shipwrights. So again, Frankie at first was just not an obvious straight-up choice like the first 4 were. We then get into Brook, and Brook at the very beginning, Luffy's like, hey, join my crew, and he's a musician and everything. But there's also a bunch of other weird, funny characters that we get introduced to at the beginning that Luffy's like, hey, join my crew. Hey, join my crew. So again, Brook, we had that happen, but we had it happen with a bunch of other random funny characters at the beginning of Thriller Bark. And we don't get his connection to Laboon until halfway through, and then it's like, okay, so is he going to go back to be with Laboon afterward? That's a nice way to end. And then it's not until the very end of the arc that we get him like getting more of a flashback and getting it established that, oh yeah, Brook's joining the crew. So again, the next four just weren't obvious choices. They weren't the first people that we met that fit into that criteria. And if Luffy was going to take the first musician that he met, he could have taken Canis from Skypiea, but nobody joined in Skypiea. So again, it's just one of those things. That's what all four of them had in common. My next thing was to look at the people who would join in the New World. Jinbei's the only one we have to think about, but I was like, okay, let's take Jinbei and let's compare him to all the candidates people are talking about. People are talking about Caribou. People are talking about Caesar. I don't think either of them joined, but who knows? All Oda has to do is give us a backstory, I guess, and it's like, well, that recontextualizes it. I guess I'm incorrect. I thought about Bon Clay. I thought about Carrot. I thought about Yamato. And what I came up with was that I think that people who would join in the New World are people that showed up in one arc, were developed in a second arc, and joined in a third. And my reasoning was, I was like, okay, Jinbei was introduced in the sort of Ace Rescue saga. Then he was developed into somebody who could be believable as a Straw Hat in Fishman Island. And then he officially joined in Whole Cake, even though we left him behind after that. And he didn't really like double officially join until Wano. So I was like, okay, that fits Carrot and Bellamy, because Carrot and Bellamy, again, are already exceptions to the usual way that the plot works. But Bellamy was introduced in Jaya, was developed into somebody throughout the course of Dressrosa that I was like, you know what, he could end up going with the Straw Hats. And then I was like, he can show up and join in the third arc. I was like, Carrot was introduced in Zoe, was developed into a character that would be believable as a Straw Hat and Whole Cake. And then if she joins in Wano, makes sense. I think I was wrong. I think I was wrong with that assessment. I think I was trying to be too specific. And maybe it's just people will take multiple arcs to join. Maybe it's just Jinbei take multiple arcs to join. So I was pretty convinced on Carrot and Bellamy, and I still am. I think it's just, it'll take them multiple arcs to develop and to end up joining, just like Jinbei did. So yeah, I think those two are solid. But then for the last person that joins, I had said Bon Clay makes sense. I said Smoker can make sense. Caesar can make sense, depending on if Oda decides to develop them. But now I think Smoker's most likely. If I had to double down on one, I would say Smoker. I'd say visually he looks a bit similar to Bellamy for me, but the thing is he looks different enough, I guess, and I just think he fits the best. Like I said, the stuff I mentioned earlier in the video with how he has too much overlap with Kobe in terms of being a Marine, that to me makes sense for one of them to stop being a Marine. I think it makes more sense for him than it does for Kobe. Him getting tired of the world government stuff, and now on Egghead he's going to see like all of Vegapunk's experiments with like the Seraphim children and everything. I just feel like Smoker makes the most sense at this point to fill in that last role. And then lastly, what I said was that the last four were going to be honorary Straw Hats, and the sort of thing that I thought bound them all together, they obviously all have princess in their title. They all have a strong connection with Luffy, but not necessarily to the rest of the crew. And they also all like have dreams that don't require them to go to Laugh Tale with the crew, and they have skills that would help out the crew in the end game. So first is Vivi, obviously Princess Vivi. She has skills or like at least lore role abilities as somebody that's sort of related to the original founders of the world government. This connection that Alabasta has to everything. She's important in that way. She has things that she can contribute to the crew, just lore-wise and story important-wise in the endgame. And she has a really strong connection with Luffy, though she hasn't even met all of the Straw Hats. Next, I think I mentioned like Shirahoshi, I mentioned Yamato, and here's where I think Vivi's solid. Vivi's coming back in the endgame, maybe not before Laugh Tale, but she's coming back in the endgame to rejoin up with the Straw Hats. But she's already considered 5.5. We know she wasn't one of the original characters that Oda had thought of for the Straw Hats. So again, I think honorary Straw Hat, she's going to join back at the end. But as one of these four honorary Straw Hats, now we have two options. We have two options for the last three. The first option, which I don't think is as likely, is Kinemon, Momonosuke, and Yamato because Luffy offered the invite to the three of them. I actually think so. Yamato's character arc was all about fulfilling Odin's will. I talked about it in my last video. And in the end, did what Odin didn't do. Yamato decided to put their own wants and their adventure on hold in order to protect Wano. Now, the whole reason that I think Yamato may have been written into the story is to serve as a stand-in for Momonosuke as honorary Straw Hat. Because Momonosuke is going to have to be hanging out on Wano. He's going to have to be commanding Zunisha and stuff. So maybe not hanging out on Wano, maybe over with Zunisha. So because of all that, Yamato has a connection to Luffy through Ace. Not really the rest of the Straw Hats whatsoever. Yamato has something to contribute in being an endgame level fighter. That's like, Yamato doesn't contribute much to help them get to Laugh Tale, but once they're in the final war, Yamato can contribute as a fighter. So again, it makes sense. Plus, if we're looking at the rest of the patterns, if we do get Carrot, Smoker, and Bellamy as the next three to join, then all three of the first sort of groups of four that joined were a guy, a girl, a guy, a guy. So then it would kind of be an inversion, or maybe like, maybe Yamato stays back on Wano and Momonosuke comes to join the crew, but I don't think so. But it would be an inversion on that, where if we get like, depending on what order they come back, Vivi, Yamato, Shirahoshi, Hancock, then it's an inversion of that, where like, then all the gender stuff that Oda's been writing with having Yamato identify as a guy, it makes sense to invert it, where then we get a girl, a guy, a girl, a girl. So Yamato would be the guy in that sense. Yamato also has Onihime, Oni Princess. Now for the last two, I think Shirahoshi, I'm dead set on that one, because Shirahoshi said she wanted to go see the force on the surface with Luffy, has a really strong connection with Luffy. We even get this scene where all the Straw Hats, including Shirahoshi, are like all together in this big spread, and also a scene where they have the pinky promise together with her and all the Straw Hats. So it's one of those things where I think she's already kind of really close in there with the crew, and I think that, again, Endgame, she's Ningyo Hime, Mermaid Princess, but Endgame, we're going to be getting into stuff with the ancient weapons, and she's one of the ancient weapons. We're going to need her to deal with the Calm Belt, need her to possibly help Luffy take down the Red Line or whatever. So again, that's one of those things where I think that, and again, all these other forces in the world are probably going to be going after her as one of the ancient weapons, especially if Caribou spills the beans on that. So that's one of the things where I'm like, I definitely think Shirahoshi is going to come back to join up with the Straw Hats, because the ancient weapon stuff is just too important. And also, she fits, again, all this other stuff when it comes to being a Vivi-like character, a Yamato-like character. Now, the last spot is difficult. I would say right now, my top guess for it is Hancock, just because I don't see what Rebecca contributes. Rebecca's known as Phantom Princess. Rebecca has a really sad backstory and dream and everything that doesn't correlate with Laugh Tale, a connection to Luffy, but not really the rest of the crew as much. But I just don't see what Rebecca like contributes to the crew, which is why I'm like, I don't really get it. Hancock, though. Hancock, Heavy Hime, Snake Princess. She has a strong connection to Luffy, not the rest of the crew. She contributes just like Yamato is an endgame level fighter. She has a lot of importance going on in the world of One Piece. So yeah, those are the 16 that I'm going to end on. Also, a lot more evidence that we could end up with 16 other than having it end up to add into 5656 Gomu Gomu. There's also the 16 Holy Bullets. When Doflamingo has his final attack against Luffy, it's the 16 Holy Bullets God Thread. And then we know that he's related to the Celestial Dragons. We know that he, like Enel, are kind of like our first hints at Eam. And then when Eam destroys the Lulusia Kingdom, we see 16 beams coming out of the sky. Again, 16 Holy Bullets. When the Oxbell sort of stuff is explained by Kid, I think it is, he says, yes, 16 rings, 8 for this and 8 for that. So again, 16 is an important number. So yeah, maybe Luffy, 16 Holy Bullets. Like I said, we have a bunch of crew scenes with Vivi and Shirahoshi. And I think that if, like, a lot of the things that people thought was weird about Yamato's writing, like, I'm going to join you, I'm going to join you, and then not, I think could make a ton of sense if Oda's just writing it this way for Yamato to be the stand-in sort of princess character, honorary Straw Hat in place of Momonosuke. So yeah. Also, oh yeah, also, one last thing before I end the video that I think adds into those 16 that I guessed. We already have, what, 9 members? So I'm guessing the next ones, in my personal opinion, I'm gonna guess Carrot, Bellamy, Smoker, maybe not in that order, and then the 4 princess characters coming to join in the end game. I'm guessing Vivi's gonna join back in the end game, Shirahoshi, Yamato, and Hancock. Those are the ones I'm gonna lock in. Could be Rebecca instead of Hancock. We could get some crazy Perona's Ghost Princess. We could get some crazy Perona backstory going on. Perona's going to be connected with the Blackbeard stuff because of Moria and everything. Last time we saw her, she was going after Moria. I doubt it, but hey, just throwing out every possibility. Those are my predictions. Those are what I'm sticking with. They're basically the same thing that I said a year or two ago. I just now have more context and more evidence. But one last thing I wanted to bring up, now that we know that Egghead is the next island, so this is a really new development in my thought process, is when we think of new characters joining Straw Hats, like what happened with, are we really just going to have Yamato show up and join? Yamato's not been in the story that long or spent that much time with the Straw Hats. For the 4 like actual main crew Straw Hats, Jinbei spent a bunch of time with the Straw Hats before joining. But all of these characters would be characters who spent time with them, because look at the arc order of the New World. We start out with Fishman Island, where Jinbei fights alongside the Straw Hats. Then we get into Punk Hazard, where Smoker fights alongside the Straw Hats. Then we get into Dressrosa, where Bellamy and also the Grand Fleet fight alongside the Straw Hats. Then we get into Zoe/Whole-Cake, where Carrot fights alongside the Straw Hats. And then we know now Wano, Jinbei fought alongside the Straw Hats and left with them. Then we have Egghead coming next. We've seen Tashigi and the Punk Hazard kids. We can assume Smoker's going to be involved. So again, we had Smoker and Punk Hazard. Could Smoker be back now? After this, I would assume because of the Kobe connection, we're going to end up with a Hachinosu arc. And if we do a Hachinosu arc, are we going to have Bellamy and the Grand Fleet come back? And is that where Bellamy could end up joining? And then if that's the order we go in, there's Elbaf. Whether Carrot comes back sooner or later, is Elbaf Carrot's place to join? Whether she comes back before then or not. Or maybe she'll come back before then, but it's just sort of mirroring with the first 4 sort of sets of arcs and then the next 4 arcs. Not counting Zoe or counting Zoe with Whole-Cake, because they kind of bleed into each other. And Zoe isn't like a fully fleshed out arc as much as the rest of them are. So yeah, is that maybe the order we're going in. And then Laugh-Tale will be after Elbaf maybe. We might stop at Lodestar for like a chapter or 2 or something, just because it's the official end, and I feel like we need to at least stop by, you know? So yeah, I don't know. Those were my theories. Those are my guesses for the final Straw Hats. Thank you so much for sticking through the video. Like if you did like the video, comment down there to tell me what you thought of this discussion, what you thought of my guesses. Again, like, even if I'm wrong, even if it's not Carrot, Bellamy, and Smoker and it's a different 3, even if my conclusions are wrong, I'm on this logic. This 16 Straw Hat theory to match into the 56-56, with 4 of them not being like full main crew Straw Hats, but honorary Straw Hats, and them being the princess characters. I'm set on that logic. Even if my conclusions are wrong, I think my logic is sound. So yeah, tell me what you think. Tell me if you think I'm wrong. It's not going to be Bellamy. It's going to be Bon Clay or something. Yeah, I guess... subscribe for more One Piece, much more on the channel. Like I said before, I'm not doing weekly videos again, at least for now, but maybe someday. Maybe if I start like... Because again, I've spent over a decade of my life loving One Piece. If Carrot comes back, maybe I'll start doing One Piece videos weekly again. Who knows? If you want to help support the channel on Patreon, it's patreon.com/HakuOfTheTubes. If you want a link to the Discord server, it's free and open for anyone. Just ask and I can give you a link. If you would like to help support the channel by being a member, you can join right here beneath the video. Thank you to people who are already patrons and members. Thank you to the chosen regulars, Etchy0 and Evan Hawley. Thank you to Cherryton students, also the Storyteller and David Langstaff, and thank you to Slayer Candidate SG. Also, thank all of you for watching, and I'll see you all next time.